Hello and welcome back to another edition of Press Pass on GNAT-TV. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director at GNAT-TV's News Project. It's a pleasure to have you with us today on Thursday, November 10th. And it's also a great pleasure to be joined today by two local reporters. Greg Sukiennik is a reporter for the Vermont News Media, which publishes the Manchester Journal, the Bennington Banner, and the Brattleboro Reformer. And we're also pleased to welcome to Press Pass for the first time, I'm sure it won't be the last time, Tory Rich, who also reports for Vermont News and Media. Greg, Tory, great to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a lot to talk about with elections and everything, and we definitely want to get to some of the results that we've all been reporting on and kind of engage in a little analysis of what that all means, if anything. But first, we have even bigger news. The Journal is now I guess, a digital daily? Would that be the fair way to describe it?
I think that's a fair way to describe it, yeah.
That is definitely a big deal. So, Greg, let me start with you. Tell us a little bit about, the digital version of the Journal that people will be able to get daily now. In addition to the print version, what will people discover when they take out a subscription?
Well, hopefully they'll be, enlightened, surprised, and delighted. I'm hoping. It's funny. We've been a weekly newspaper for 162 years, but as you know, this printing costs only increase, and the demand for digital news only increases. And so the decision was made that we should make this. And I think that the folks who I work for Vermont News and Media also saw that there was a market here for. There's plenty of news in the North Shire, that there's an ad market here, and there's avid readers here, a strong readership that identifies with this paper. So we decided to go sort of a digital daily. So it's a lot like if you've been to our website, there's an e-edition that would come out every week that basically looks like a newspaper except on a screen. Basically, what we're doing is we're printing one of those every day. And then the print edition is still coming out Friday, same as it ever did. As part of that initiative, we've invested in some more writing and photography. But one of the key addition, would be my good friend Tory here, who's just joined the staff a couple months ago. So Tory, tell us a little bit more about yourself and about how you came to us and how it's going so far.
So I was a teacher at Mount Anthony when I first moved back to Vermont about 4 years ago, and I was able to escape to become a writer for a military news outlet called Sandbox News, and so that's how I got my start writing. And Susan Plaisance, I'm on the MAU school board with her, and apparently she looked me up, and so she originally about a year and a half ago asked me if I wanted to be a stringer for the Banner, and at the time I had a second job also working for another military outlet called We Are the Mighty. So I said no, but now about 5 months ago, I took that opportunity to freelance for the Banner. And then a couple of months ago, Noah asked me if I would be interested in full-time work. And I just started, I honestly, I live down in Pownell, and I didn't know much about Manchester. I'd only been up here, honestly, a few times. And it's like I told them when they hired me, I'm kind of the worst Vermonter ever because I don't hunt or fish or ski or any of the winter sports because I wrestled for Mount Anthony and didn't have time for any of that stuff. And so I think that's actually going to be a lot of fun because I'll be out there on the bunny hills with 5-year-olds learning how to ski maybe for a possible story. But yeah, everything. I love Manchester so far. I cover sports, so I've been out covering BBA, and it's that's been a lot of fun. And just meeting everybody so far, meeting everybody at the town hall meetings. Everything's new to me, so it's a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed it so far. Happy to be aboard.
Well, I'm sure it's going to be great. There's an awful lot to find out about for sure. Something new.
I would look forward to stories about you being the youngest GISP student ever at Bromley, learning how to ski with the little kids in the bunny hill. I want to read. I want that story. So we about 2 into 1 there. Now, Tory has been excellent for us. He's been a quick study and He's jumped right in and did some breaking news reporting and is sort of learning his way through. So it's been an exciting. It hasn't. You think that going daily would be a big change, but actually, it's just sort of producing content on a more regular basis. It really hasn't been the sort of back-breaking avalanche of news. And you did the job too. I mean, that sometimes in a weekly schedule there would be sort of a boom-bust cycle to it. This is a little more regulated. And so far the reception's been pretty good. So if you're interested, go to our website. There's been an offer where you get a first month for free. I believe it's the subscribe button is on the upper right-hand corner of the website. Or you can always, call the circulation department, which is still with our cousins once removed in Pittsfield, Mass. at 800-245-0254.
So how is it different from the basic website that I'm assuming is still going to be up there, like manchesterjournal.com? This would be a different publication, basically from the.
Well, basically, it's the website is still populating with content as it ever does. It's just doing that on it's just that the stories are going into that e-edition every day, and so if you click on that e-edition, you'll get a whole new journal every day. Now that's gonna there's two of us, so there's going to be some content from around the state as well. So you're not just getting just a few stories we can turn out in a day. You're getting, it's a bit of a regional picture as well, but really it's Manchester and Northshire focused. So, so we have Chris Mays from the Reformer helping us out with some of the more treetop coverage, if you will, from Londonderry and the mountains. And we've got some sponsorships from up that way as well. I believe Stratton is a sponsor for us, the resort. We have a number of sponsors actually who are helping us out with this. And I don't want to name one and then not name the rest of them. So election night took my brain too. But thanks to all of those sponsors who are helping us with this project.
All right. Well, we'll certainly be watching and reading and checking it out. And, that's great to see that, additional publication come along and definitely, something I'm sure we're all ready for that time now to get those stories out, as fast as possible. Because it sure seems like there's been a lot of news happening, and obviously this past week with the election, we all got to take the deep dive into that. Certainly, the big picture nationally was pretty fascinating, but and the results have been kind of interesting too. But let's start off with some of our local races here, and I suppose the one that I know I was kind of watching fairly closely was the one for the Bennington 4 district, the Manchester, Arlington, Sandgate, part of Sunderland district, with incumbents Kathleen James and Seth Bongartz being challenged by Joe Jervis from Arlington. There's so many lawn signs up for Mr. Jervis around the area. I thought that could wind up being a fairly close race, but in the end, I think off the top of my head, he came in about 1,000 votes or so behind Seth Bongartz and Kathleen James, who wound up with roughly the same amount of votes each. What were your takeaways from that race? Was that the outcome roughly what you expected, or was that a surprise?
Well, I'll defer to Greg on that because I'm still pretty new to the election game. This was my first time through. I definitely learned a lot. I've always been a good writer, but Greg and everyone else is teaching me how to be a good journalist. So I'm still working on that part. But
I have to say it was fun to shepherd new reporters through their first election day too. It's like I remember what that was like.
I know.
I would say this. I did notice that that there were a lot of signs for Joe Jervis up and down Route 7A, but that can be sometimes a false indicator because lawn signs don't vote. In my hometown of Pittsfield, there are a number of folks who didn't wind up being mayor, despite the fact that they had the most lawn signs. So that's just kind of just an aside. Also, I've been here since 2016, and this is the first election where one of the incumbents didn't lose, going all the way back to three terms. Kathleen and Seth were they'd had a busy term. They had some some results to bring back as proof of candidacy. I'm not sure how Joe Jervis's message about. I mean, what's the that came out in the debate that you hosted, that he had been to the January 6th insurrection rally. I think his attendance there, that might have stuck with some people. Yeah. But I think if you sort of look at the larger trend across the state, the sort of the step to the right that the Republican Party made, and following more sort of more national agenda didn't play out so well. And I think that's just more or less that's kind of reflected across much of our region.
Right. Well, the other interesting race I thought was kind of intriguing was the one that the district just north of here, the Bennington-Rutland won, I guess it is, and that was an open seat. Linda Joy Sullivan, the current incumbent, deciding not to run for a fourth term. And so we had Bill Giotti from Mount Tabor and Mike Grice from Dorset competing head to head on that one. And that's a district that's in the past definitely trended Republican. Before Linda Joy arrived, it was represented by Patty Comline, who had been the Republican minority leader. Before Patty, it was Walt Freed, who was the last Republican Speaker of the House.
That one.
And that's going to be
that piece of trivia.
Yeah, going to be a while, I guess, because I guess the big picture is that the Democrats picked up 4 seats in the state house and now have a veto-proof supermajority if the progressives and independents vote with them. But anyway, so I thought that was a district that could easily have gone either way, and the result was pretty close. I think 129 votes, I think, separated
sounds right. Yep.
Bill and Mike on that one.
Well, just the way the results came in, Danby came in first, and Danby came in for Bill Giotti, which makes sense because that's sort of his hometown. And so we wondered, okay, well, is this going to be, how close is this going to be? But then the Dorset results came in next, and that broke big for Mike Rice.
About 200 vote difference, I think, in Dorset.
So, I mean, and from there, really, it just was he going to be able to hold on in Mount Tabor and Land Grove and Peru? And he did. I think, but yeah, you're right about that district has leaned sort of purple, if you will, if we're going by colors. So there's a challenge there for Mike Rice moving forward to make those constituents happy now that they've trusted him in a close race. But I also thought that, Bill Giotti was a really solid candidate in that, for that district. He had Linda Joy Sullivan support. So, depending how things go in 2 years, I wouldn't be surprised if he gave it another shot.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no question. I also thought it was also a very civil kind of race. I mean, we had both the candidates down here back in September for a discussion and conversation. And, in contrast to some of the other races that we heard about elsewhere in the country, I thought, it was kind of a very respectful and policy-oriented kind of conversation. And I thought that was my sense of how they campaigned pretty much right on through until this week. So that was nice to see. And anyway, I guess the other local race that was kind of intriguing was the Bennington County Sheriff's race. I don't think I've ever seen a race before where the 3 candidates who were in the Democratic primary wound up being back in the general election because one of them changed their party affiliation to Republican and another one ran as an independent. But James Gully Jr. seemed to clearly come through with a pretty wide margin. I think he won by over 1,000 votes, roughly speaking, countywide. So it'll be interesting to see what changes he brings to that office.
Well, to be honest, Jim Theory has been covering that race for us for the Bennington Banner, so we've been less involved with it. It was interesting to me that the margin was more or less that they ran the same race twice, and sometimes you wonder if you're going to get different results if you try it again. Absolutely not. It was very much the same results, if not maybe a little more so for Mr. Gully. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know how long it's been since Bennington County's changed sheriffs. Not certainly, not on my watch. I mean, Chad Schmidt's been sheriff, since I got here. So
that goes back to 2010 or 2011, somewhere around there. So it's he's been in office for a while. But yeah, well, it was just I don't know. It was kind of an interesting race to watch, and well, we'll be following Mr. Gully along as he takes the reins down there. So then we have all these statewide races, all of which were kind of intriguing in one way or another. Let's start with the congressional one in the Senate. I mean, I guess going in, there didn't seem to be, a whole lot of doubt that Becca Balint, the former state senator, or she still is a state senator until January, was going to have the advantage over Liam Madden. Although with a third party, a libertarian candidate, Eric Reddick, also in the mix, you kind of never know what's going to happen there. But and then in the Senate race with Peter Welch, obviously he has gigantic name recognition and probably came into it also with a fairly large campaign uh, financial picture. So his victory over Gerald Malloy, I guess, wasn't too widely, surprising. Were you surprised though by the margins? I guess I just was wondering if maybe the size of the victory was kind of.
Oh, I was interested that it's kind of it's sort of a peek behind the curtain moment for me because I'd formerly worked at the Associated Press. And so I'm familiar with sort of what they do to figure out when to project an election result and sort of when they kind of make it official. What was interesting was that they projected Peter Welch as the winner of the Senate race, maybe not even a minute after the polls had closed.
I noticed that.
Yeah, you know what? We're done here. And really, that margin wasn't that much more dramatic than the margins enjoyed by Becca Balint or by Phil Scott for governor. And yet those races weren't called until hours later. What I can tell you, sort of from behind the curtain is that the newsrooms really don't have a lot to say about that. There's a polling operation that AP has, and then they sort of, that decision's kind of made separate. That's my recollection anyway. Things might have changed. It's been a while. But I can't say that I was surprised. I was a little surprised that actually that Liam Madden pulled as many votes as he did, considering considering how, sort of the way that he was nominated, as an independent who took the Republican nomination and said, I wonder how many of those votes just might have been, when you look across the line and you sort of see at all the statewide races, you see sort of about 60% or more for most of the Democrats and about 30% or so for most of the Republicans. And I just think maybe that might have sort of reflected partisan intention on that more than really, well, I really like that guy. He's getting my vote.
Maybe it shouldn't be surprising, as you said, that, there's a lot of name recognition in the Senate and governor elections and everything. But it was interesting that those were such wide margins. But then at the local level, we had a couple of very close elections, and I thought that to me that was kind of encouraging because it at least at the local level, maybe people weren't voting just team red or team blue, and people were more informed and voting on the issues. And one of my biggest takeaways was the town clerks I talked to were all saying that voter turnout was outstanding.
Right. Right.
I think Dorset was actually among the highest in the state. Was 68% of registered voters turning out. So that was encouraging.
Well, a lot of that, of course, is due to the mail-in voting, right? I mean, the town clerks I talked to as I wandered around some of the polling places all said they gotten a lot of mail-in ballots to count. So that clearly is here to stay. I should think. So yeah,
he's actually taller than me. It was bothering me that I was looking taller than him.
So turning to the other races, I mean, I guess they all kind of came in as expected. Phil Scott obviously was the prohibitive favorite, and he won by a very wide margin, 50 points roughly. And then the Secretary of State and Treasury, State Treasurer and Attorney General, we had Sarah Copeland Hanzas, Mike Pichek, and Charity Clark all winning again by pretty wide margins over fairly, I don't know, I want to call it token opposition, but people we hadn't heard much about. But I find myself wondering, since Phil Scott was the one Republican who kind of in all those races who won and won by such a wide margin, if that's going to tempt the statewide Republican Party to kind of maybe veer back towards the middle a little bit more than what they seem to have, the direction they seem to have gone, at least in this election cycle, more over towards a more right-wingish kind of posture.
Yeah, Trump aligned, let's say, because it don't look, Phil Scott doesn't, he hasn't shown a lot of interest in trying to, sort of reshape the Republican Party in his, and sort of in his image. He's sort of let the party operatives, like such as Deb Bilodeau, who's the previous Republican state chair, and Paul Dame, who's the current chair, to sort of do their own thing. Sort of happy to welcome their support, but even some of those folks, don't see Phil Scott as a real Republican. So maybe there's just no love lost there. I wrote in the analysis, that's in the banner today, that I was kind of, one of the things about Brenda Siegel's The Margin of Victory was that it really wasn't that much further away from what David Zuckerman achieved, with much more money and much bigger name recognition. But I think it speaks a lot to just sort of that Phil is popular, that voters seem to want the balance of a Democratic majority in the legislature, which they clearly wanted, and a Republican governor, which they also clearly wanted. But one wonders, if the party doesn't go more to the middle. Phil Scott is the only Republican who's won a statewide race in 12 years. You'd have to go back to Brian Doobie for the last one before that. It was way before, I was living in Connecticut at that point. Don't blame me. It was the job. It's, at some point, one wonders if they have to sort of take stock and realize, well, how, it's good to sort of stand for these principles and to sort of, hold fast on them at some point, but you don't get a seat on the table unless you win. And we sort of, one wonders, is Phil Scott the last Republican governor of Vermont that we'll see for a while? And if he isn't, then, how does that happen? And, we shouldn't point out here that we do have a local angle on those other statewide races. Charity Clark, a Burr & Graduate and member of Burr&Burton's board of trustees, also a member of the family that owned Clark's supermarket in Londonderry for years and years, is our first elected woman attorney general. So
yeah, well, so that's cool. She'll answer our phone calls when we call, right? That means
I do hope so. Yeah, Charity's actually really. I've enjoyed working with her, in the AG's office before. So,
you reminded me of one point I wanted to briefly talk about is the lieutenant governor's race, which we kind of passed over there. You're talking about whether or not this might sort of tempt the Republican Party in Vermont to sort of swing back towards the middle. Joe Benning, who was the Republican candidate for lieutenant governor, came the closest to winning. He still trailed David Zuckerman by a pretty substantial margin, I guess you could say, but it was certainly the closest of all those statewide races. And I thought Benning really positioned himself as very much a Phil Scott fan, and someone who would I'm sure Governor Scott would have loved to have had Joe Benning as the lieutenant governor.
Sure. I think it's I think in terms of profile, Phil Scott was Donald Trump's biggest critic in Vermont, but in terms of sort of kind of laying it out there and sort of level of condemnation, Joe Benning was right up there with some other folks in the more moderate wing in terms of criticism of the insurrection. So, I think part of that might be him. Part of that might be, it's, you have, the dynamics of a race, go into, both candidates and what folks think about them. Maybe folks are a little more lukewarm about David Zuckerman running for lieutenant governor for a second time. Maybe some folks just thought that Joe Benning was an alternative. Maybe they simply wanted to see a more moderate Republican. They wanted to reward that. But Joe Benning's also probably, he's an older fella. He's got a law practice that he's, getting back to. Who knows if he runs again? So that's kind of that brings us back to that quandary about where the winning statewide candidates are in the Republican Party.
Yeah, well, we shall see, I guess. Well, before we have to go here, Tory, I wanted to bring you back into this here. And any sort of new local stories that you're working on or have been working on that you want to tell us about now that we're past the election and we can sort of breathe again or whatever? Uh, what's been going on that you've been following?
Yeah, so I'll have a story coming out about limits on potency for cannabis. Just basically trying to take a balanced approach to it. Like what are the arguments for and against? And obviously, I think a lot of people have the incorrect assumption that marijuana doesn't really do a lot of harm. I think there's a lot of that perception out there. And so, I talked to a couple of public health organizations, community organizations that are especially focused on keeping teenagers and adolescents away from substance abuse. And that's really the biggest issue is, you're not going to be able to, it's going to be very difficult to ever raise the legal age of consumption to 25 in a country where people can join the military at 18. And I don't see that ever changing either. But honestly, that might be one of the best things to do. Just speaking, I was a health teacher when I was a teacher, and so as far as the effect on the developing brain, but there's a good argument. There's a good argument to be made just for personal responsibility as well. And the retailers I spoke to were genuinely very big on educating people, and it's not just about the money for them. And the retailers I spoke to were very big on, that cannabis helps people. And so, when you look at the statistics, it's not that marijuana can't do any harm, but they're intent on educating their customers and helping people. And what was Brandon McKee, the CFO for Silver Therapeutics, he said, low and slow. So basically, just low dosages, take your time. And I think that, the retailers that I spoke to at least have a very responsible approach. And so it really just comes down to personal responsibility, just like anything, and not using to excess.
Great. Well, we're going to have to leave it there for today, but I want to again thank you both for making the time for this. Greg Sukiennik and Tory Rich of Vermont News and Media. I still have to struggle to get my head around that, but better known as the Manchester Journal Bennington Banner and Brattleboro Reformer. Well, gentlemen, thanks again. Great to have you both back on the program, and we'll see you again, I'm sure, very soon. Tory, good luck out there on the beat, and we'll definitely have you back on Press Pass at some point in the future to keep us up to date on what's going on in the local neighborhood here. And thanks to all of you who've been with us as well, watching. Hope you found our program interesting, and we'll see you again the next time. Meanwhile, have a great day. Take care.